SIT is a family support intervention developed and delivered by Brandon Centre. This program aims to help parents and carers deal with their children's behavioral problems and challenges, including antisocial behavior. Firstly, let me briefly outline the approach of SIT. This treatment works in 2 phases. Phase 1 is all about intensive therapy sessions with parents and carers. They learn all sorts of tools and tips to handle children's challenging behavior. Then comes Phase 2, where the family works with a different therapist. During Phase 2, the therapist gradually steps back and parents put what they've learnt into action, making a transition to independence from SIT. SIT is based on the idea that a child's behavior is influenced by lots of different things around them and their family, the systems in their life. So, the treatment doesn't just focus on the parents and the children, but also looks at their family, education and communities to make positive changes.
Brandon Centre had a long tradition prior to developing SIT in multisystemic therapy. We did the first RCT in the UK and MST, and we learned a lot from that. And out of our application of MST, for those of you who might be familiar with MST, it's an American model, and the context in the US is quite different to here, in terms of social care and what's available over there, which is a lot less than is available here in most cases. So there was a lot of learning for us from the work we did with MST, and we found that we needed a slightly different approach. So there are a number of differences between MST and the adaptation that we developed, which is SIT, and that includes the treatment length. So MST tends to be shorter, 3 to 5 months, and then the work ends and it's all intensive, whereas we see family intensively for 6 months, and then there's a 6-month aftercare period with a different clinician where they're quite well supported and they can have quite a lot of top-up sessions. But really the main bulk of the work happens in phase 1 in the first 6 months. And yeah, as you've heard, we were able to see families with quite complex difficulties for a longer period of time. Like Ellie said, there's a lot of challenging behavior, there's absconding behavior, there's violence, a lot of school refusal. Yeah, and we found in working with our commissioners too that SIT better meets their needs compared to MST previously. So we're commissioned by local authorities, we're commissioned by FCAMS, which is the Forensic Cam Service, and mostly in London, mostly North London, but also take some cases outside of London, like neighbouring counties like Hertfordshire. And really the aim is to prevent young people from entering costly out-of-home placements, from going to care or custody, and to prevent family breakdown.
So we've just got a picture up here of the SIT model. This is what we use to guide us in our treatment with families. So we start right at the top, and to your question of Kate, of the families that sort of get the most out of the service, that's assessed right at the beginning. So we might be overcoming any blocks to engagement and collaboration, agreeing the treatment goals with the family and the wider ecology. So that's the network as well, which is where the systemic branch of the work comes in. And then we're taken down into the model with the young person at the centre, work primarily with the family around the young person and also the wider ecology. So really, truly, any adult that is available and wants to participate in treatment or is seeing the child on a regular basis, we would be looking to pull all of those people into treatment. Once we have overcome any blocks, we then go round this model. So we are looking at whatever the priority treatment goal is. So, for example, it may well be aggression. That might be where we start if that's the most pressing challenge. We would then formulate the behaviour using a process that we call SIT formulation ladders, which are a really neat little problem-solving tool to identify any causal or maintaining factors in the behaviour. We then prioritise those. We devise and implement the interventions with the family. So this is a truly transparent process. We are sitting there with parents, with all of the papers out on the table, figuring out together what is going on and what can we do about it. Once we put the intervention in, we then review the progress and identify any blocks with the family. So if we've got a nifty little behavioural chart that addresses physical aggression, we would put that in, and we would expect it not to work, certainly not the first time, and not to work for a little bit. So that, again, we're totally transparent with families about that. It's going to take time for these things to shift. So we work and think, okay, it's not working. Why is it not working? What are the blocks? What are the loopholes that have come up in this contract that we've put in place? And then we just simply go round and round with the families until we have addressed the problem behaviours, so the referral behaviours, aggression, school refusal, self-harm, whatever it might be. And we do that with the family until they are in a place where they feel they can see the changes in the behaviour, and they're ready to sort of move on to the next phase of treatment, which is all about sustaining that progress made. So the model is used as well in phase 2, and by phase 2 families sort of know the process inside out, and the hope is, and what we see is, that they are then able to take that away with them post sit and use it into the future with anything that might come up. So that's a little introduction to the model itself.
I would just add, Ellie, to that, just what I hear from you a lot is about the health warning that things might get worse.
Get worse before it's getting better. Yes.
So it requires a level of resilience and high pain threshold from the parents.
Yeah, it's something that we say in assessment. We say it in the assessment. Taking this treatment up may mean, and it will likely mean, that things will get a bit worse before they get better. Because, of course, the kids are used to behaving in whatever way they're in. They're not used to parents being in that executive position, so they may escalate their behaviour in order to re-establish the status quo. You know, back off, parents. Give me my phone back. I'm not gonna go quietly. But we are with parents through that. We also have a 24/7 on-call support service for parents to use. So if a kick-off happens at 3 a.m. on a Saturday, they can call that line, and one of the therapists on the team will be there on the phone talking them through the plans or giving them advice on just how to stay calm and to stick to their guns in the moment. So we really are properly wraparound holistic support to get parents through the worst of the process and out the other side. So that model we use with every single family, but the integrative part of the model is where we have the luxury of choosing whatever therapeutic modality or approach fits with that family in that moment. So these are just some of the things that we might use. We've obviously got quite a few evidence-based modalities in there. We've got CBT, family therapies, behavioural therapies, but we also have creative therapies, the theories of change that we use. It really is all welcome, and we work with we work within a highly skilled MDT, so everybody is bringing different training and different knowledge to the table, and we meet for group supervision once a week where we all share ideas and share the blocks that we might be experiencing with a family and work together as a team system to overcome those blocks, and so each therapist is equipped with a whole host of knowledge from the rest of the team as well. So these are just some examples of where we might use those theories in the practice and in the delivery of the model. So things like CBT, we might do a few sessions of CBT with a parent who is struggling with some past trauma or even present trauma. Art therapy sessions, perhaps for parents that are maybe more sort of visual or kinesthetic learners. It might be that kind of approach is much better suited to them than just talking. We work really closely with schools and aligning those systems who are, again, often they've tried everything. They feel a bit of a loss of what to do differently. So we were able to go in and work with them to bring some new ideas and new hope to the table. We've got behavioural reward charts. So we've got behavioural therapy. That's, those tend to be pretty straightforward, but 9.9 times out of 10, they're not easy to just put in and, wow, the child's changed their behaviour. No, we've got to be with parents and go through the gets worse before it gets better effect once we implement a behavioural chart. We would always look to approach families with a strength-based lens, so solution-focused approaches with in sessions with parents can be really effective, and that's something that we're always trying to keep our minds working in that strength-focused way, so we can build on what the families already have, the skills that they already have. And then, yes, just at the bottom, we've touched on, where possible, the use of family therapy. So if the child is able to engage and parents are able to get their kid into the room, sitting at the table with them, then we would be looking to use a wide variety of family therapy techniques to sort of re-establish that relationship, and work with the family system as a whole.
So did you have any threshold to what level of violence you would accept?
Yeah, so the referrals tend to come to us when things are really bad, and oftentimes what happens is that lots of other services have been tried before, so they might have had all kinds of interventions through social care, through CAMS, through school, but then that hasn't worked. So when they come to us, more often than not, I'd say 9 out of 10 cases are exhibiting a level of violence, and some cases it's very extreme, so lots of child to parent violence, sibling violence out in the community as well. So that tends to be one of our core referral behaviours and something that we work with.
In relation to because obviously we work together, I'm just interested about the drop-off impact, because obviously it's an intensive program over 6 months. So do parents drop out? What's the rate of dropout?
That's a really good question, because it's something that in the findings of the evaluation of this was something that was noticed in particularly between phase 1 and phase 2. So some of the reasons for that were actually really positive, that parents felt actually that they'd made enough progress and they actually wanted no more therapists coming around the home because they were fine and they were ready to go. So that is something that hopefully is reflected when we look at the results. But there are some cases where parents might drop out and struggle to engage with the intensive nature of the service. I mean, we do whatever we can to overcome that barrier and to meet parents where they're at. But obviously, in some cases, it's just not possible. But not a lot, I will say.
So my understanding is that you start work with the parents and then the children and the rest of the family become involved. So how engaged or what proportion of children did engage in the programme?
The success of the intervention actually does not rely at all on the young person wanting to engage. Obviously, if they do want to engage and we're able to get them to engage later down the line, then they're very, very welcome in sessions. But the power of this intervention is that we only really need the parents to be fully engaged. So for those kids that are, hard to reach or don't want to talk to any therapists and maybe don't see any problems with their behaviour, we can still treat those children via their parents.
Hi, I just was wondering if you could comment on maybe what parents benefit the most in terms of any particular characteristics at the outset that you can see kind of really contribute to the success of the intervention.
It's a level of investment from the outset. Obviously, a high level investment is of course going to yield better results. But even saying that, a lot of our families might not feel particularly hopeful or particularly activated or particularly able to engage at the start of treatment. But again, that would be a fairly normal and typical block that we'd work really hard to overcome and to really get those parents on board.
So what would happen to families or children if they, if you like, relapsed?
So that's where phase 2 would come in. So the treatment can be a year in total. Phase 1 is the very intense phase, and then phase 2 is literally that kind of aftercare sustainability support. And it's for exactly things like that. You know, we don't expect families to sort of finish and be all wrapped up with a nice bow. There are going to be setbacks and relapses. So that's where the phase 2 therapist, who is slightly more stepped back, those sessions are around once or twice a month, but more frequently if something has come off track or something's gone wrong or changed. That therapist can then get back involved and sort of facilitate the family to use the model, use the learnings in phase 1 to find the answer to whatever the problem is, whilst also maintaining the connection with the network, so social care cams, whoever else is involved, making sure the family still has that sort of more enduring support around them, but facilitated sort of via the SIT approach.
I was just interested about the causal and maintaining factors that you mentioned. I just wondered if you could give a few examples.
Absolutely. So yes, okay. Now I've got to think of a really good one. So I mean, let's come to physical aggression, because I think that's something that we see in nearly all of our cases. So we would be looking with parents to find out what we, the adults, can change that is either causing or maintaining this behaviour. So a very common maintaining factor in physical aggression is that there might be no effective safety plan. So when the young person is escalating physically, parents have no real guidance or knowledge of how to respond safely in that situation. So they may just be kind of winging it, which means that the response to the aggression tends to be quite inconsistent. The child might not be getting that regular reinforcement that this behaviour is not okay, so there might be no consistent rules, rewards and consequences. It might be a relational rupture between child and parent, so we might pull that out as, okay, there's a relational factor in this aggression. We would look to probably treat those ones maybe a little bit later, because we'd go for things that we can address right here, right now. If we can create a really effective safety plan right here, right now, parents are going to know what they're doing better. They're going to feel more confident to manage the situation, and the child's also going to experience that containment and that safety from the parents sticking to the plan again and again and again and again.
Something that you mentioned about having your sort of supervision where you share ideas. I was just curious as to, is there particular expertise within your teams that you guys sort of share, like areas that you specialize in terms of the therapies? Or
we have a whole host of skills. We've got creative therapies, we've got clinical psychology backgrounds, we've got family therapy. It's a whole host of modalities, and there might be some intervention. So things like the behavioural charts, those tend to be fairly straightforward, and you can sort of look back on previous cases and pull plans from other cases, because those tend to be fairly similar. But when it comes to the work with the parent, it really is whatever is right for that parent in that situation. So I guess there's no kind of one thing that we would do with every family. Some parents might be really familiar with, like, CBT, for example, and might have even been in their own therapy previously. So that's just a really straightforward way for them to work through whatever they need to. But for other families that might have a really negative view of therapy or might want nothing to do with formal therapy, we would try something a bit more informal and just a bit more creative to meet them where they're at.
I just wondered about any kind of cultural aspects that you have taken into account when delivering, because there's quite a variety of therapies there. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if there was any challenges, firstly, around what those therapies and overlapping, and were there any professional kind of challenges around that, and also the cultural aspect and how you took that into account when delivering this work.
Thank you for that question. That's been a very present conversation actually in our last few supervisions, so it's really good to have some space to think about that. I think one of the things that we've been very conscious of is what treatment modality we're always conscious of what treatment modality we're using, but something like CBT, for example, that the evidence base is with a majoritively white clientele, that is something that we have to be mindful of, and really we're not trying to force any family to do anything that doesn't fit with them and their culture and where they're at. that's sort of the freedom and the luxury that we get as a part of this model, that we have to do what that family needs us to do. We have to be what that family needs us to be, taking into account everything around them, their cultural context, their family of origin, their own history. And that's just parents, mum and dad, and then through that's how we're able to create that same environment around the child where it's been really thought about.
Did you find that there was any language barriers when working with certain families?
Yes.
And how did you overcome some of that? Is that because there's, the therapy, knowing some of the families we've worked with, this certain kind of therapies wouldn't be so understandable. We find that as in the delivery of NVR, nonviolent resistance techniques. So that's been an issue for us.
Yeah. With families where there is a language difference, it's something that, so in the collaboration of the process, we are always checking in, how is this sounding to you? Am I making sense? Is there anything I need to be doing differently in order to help this really land? We have had some cases where the language difference was not something that we could overcome in that way, because we tried the treatment with an interpreter a few times, and it something is lost in translation, unfortunately. And obviously finding an interpreter that's able to come along 3 times a week to a family home that's its own barrier. So I suppose there are some things that can't be overcome, or that we've not yet found the way to overcome, but it is something that we're always checking in with, and it's very typical for our families to have to speak different languages.
You end up not working with that family then, because this is something that we've had to discuss, because the translation can be, and the words can be a challenge for families to understand. So what?
I don't think we've not in the YEF pilot, and not that I can remember that we've not been able to work with a family, but I suppose that would be a thing sort of pre-referral. So our commissioners and our referrers decide which cases come through to us. So there may be families pre-referral that haven't gone down that pathway because of a language difference. Yeah,
I guess moving on from the kind of cultural dimension to the work, I guess I was wondering about how you manage differences in cultural expectations of the role of a child, or the role of gender, for instance, in a family system. And I guess obviously there can be differences across all families and cultures, but particularly if there's maybe very clear expectations from a particular culture around how a child should be, and whether that can be challenging to navigate in the work, if that's different to perhaps the assumptions you might hold as a clinical team.
Absolutely, yeah. It can. It's definitely something that we have had to navigate and continue to navigate. And I suppose that's where the weekly supervision is such a helpful tool, because we are together every week discussing the cases and discussing these, very, very present potential blocks that might be coming up. So not only have we got everybody in the room, but across both teams we meet once a month and really get those, everybody's skills are pulled out and used in whatever way we can to really, again, just meet the family where they're at. In order for any of this stuff to work, we need to have families engaged, and we need to be aligned with them where they're at. So we make great efforts to make sure families really feel that, and they feel seen and they feel heard as they are, where they are, without any judgment, in order so that we can sort of look at what can be changed and what can be shifted with them. So it's not us just coming in and telling them what to do. Obviously, we all know that that's not going to work. So it's a really important part of treatment, which is building that connection and building that therapeutic alliance in order to create the conditions where change can happen.